Good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin O'Connell, founder of the Niche Movement. Again, I'll be your host tonight for this niche story with a very close friend, former colleague, and a huge supporter of the Niche Movement, Stacy Campesi. So, Stacy, welcome.
Thanks, Kevin.
So before we jump into it, we just want to give a few shout-outs and a few announcements of the things we've been working on here with the Niche Movement. So for anybody following along, 2 weeks ago we launched our Kickstarter campaign. Have had a tremendous outpour of support and contributions, and believe it or not, we're already 60% funded. Our campaign goes till August 12th, and we're almost 60% at our initial goal, and we're looking to write this book by January 1st. So jump on to Kickstarter, take a look at it. We'd love for you to share it and support it in any way that you can. The other thing that we actually just been working on is we re-released our niche list, which is jobs that 20-somethings will actually be interested in and want to apply for. So we just sent out a new list this morning to 30 or 40 new subscribers. And so if you're interested or know people that are looking for jobs, especially in the creative field, take a look and subscribe to the niche list, where we reveal 5 to 10 jobs each week, along with one of our niche tips and one of our most recent blog posts. So that's what's new in the world of the niche movement. But again, I'm really excited. We used to work together, but without further ado, I'll turn it over to Stacy. And Stacy, feel free to introduce yourself and tell us how you got to where you are right now.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Kevin, so much for having me on tonight. I'm so excited to chat with you. And it's such a pleasure to be speaking to everyone in the audience listening. And so like Kevin said, him and I have known each other for quite some time. And it's so just cool to me, the fact that our journeys brought us here together tonight. And so Kevin and I met many moons ago when we were both working as graduate assistants, working our way through grad school. And, you know, we were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and hoping to take over the world. And unfortunately, I learned very quickly out of the gate that my ideal of the way I wanted to impact the world when I was an undergrad and what I thought I'd be doing was far from reality once I got out there. And so I ended up in jobs that I hated and that drained me and that just made me feel like I was never going to amount to anything. And it took a lot. It took a lot of disappointments, and it took a lot of growing to realize that there is a different way, and that your job can be something that fuels you and that ignites you and that brings you passion. And so after many moons of doing something I despised, I woke up one day and said, okay, I'm done. I'm done being a slave to my cube. And I found coaching. And so I enrolled myself in coaching school. And little did I know it was going to be not just a career changer, but a total transformational experience for me personally. And so now I'm blessed. I'm lucky enough that every day I get to help young professionals find what moves them and find the passion in their life and reignite that fuel and fire.
So what was it, Stacey? So I think there's a few things you hit on there, and I think the key word was ambition. You and I, when we came out of undergrad and we were working as graduate assistants, we had a ton of ambition. We thought we had a purpose for our jobs and what we want to do, aside from working with college students. But what do you see right now with this generation, whether it's fresh out of college or 2 or 3 years in their career, they have all this passion, and sometimes they're put in an environment where, like, the air is let out of the balloon. Like, why do you think that happens? And is there anything you think young professionals can do something about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this generation is very unique in the fact that they're so creative and so ambitious. And they're not okay with the status quo. And so in previous generations, you know, folks went to school, they got a degree, they became a teacher, a nurse, firefighter, etc. And they were okay with that identity. Not anymore. So today's generation wants to be constantly challenged, wants to constantly grow, wants to constantly test their own limits. And so I think that they're really frustrated because people are trying to put them in a box that they just don't fit in. And so their ambition and creativity is much different than we've seen in the past. And so, yeah, you're going to be really frustrated when you're trying to live in someone else's box. And so the challenge is, how do you break the rules? And not only do you break them, how do you create your own rules and create a new life for yourself that you are totally 100% comfortable in? Kevin, can you see me?
Yeah, I'm here. We are
Okay.
reconnected. For
Okay.
the we lost two viewers.
Uh,
For the five of you hanging on, thank you very much. Of course, there's technical issues.
of course. We'll work through
All right,
them.
let's pick up where we left off. We're still live. Thank you, Google Hangout, and thank you, Optimum Online, for crapping out on me. If anybody's listening, tweet Optimum Online and tell them their internet connection here in New Jersey is awful.
Good here in
All
DC.
right. Well, I lost you obviously about the question I asked you about, why this generation is so quickly in their career, and you were obviously giving, some insight to why you think that happens.
Mhm. Yeah. So what I was saying is that, just to quickly sum it up for those of you that missed it, this generation is so creative and they're not okay with the status quo. And so they're frustrated because they're trying to fit into these pre-created boxes that have, been set forth to us. Whether that be I'm supposed to be a teacher, I'm supposed to be a nurse, I'm supposed to be any one of those traditional, take any of those traditional career paths. And that's not the world we live in anymore. And so this generation really wants to find their way and really make an impact and a difference. And they're finding that the cookie cutter template doesn't work. And so, yeah, they're really frustrated. But the really great thing is that when you finally figure out that you can break the rules and you're comfortable doing so, your world changes completely.
And so, I mean, the big thing, the messages and the things that you and I have talked about at length the last few months are very in line with what you're doing as a solopreneur, and what the niche movement is obviously about, is trying to end employment unhappiness, and try to help this generation pivot into a career they love. And so one of the things you and I talked about a lot is values, right? And so we realized that one person's values, the intrinsic values that they live by day to day, sometimes don't often match up to their work environment and the values of their boss, their coworkers, or the projects they're working on. Why don't you jump into what the values are and what I'm talking about, and then we can kind of maybe talk about how people can reflect and figure out what their values are and see if they align or not.
Sure, absolutely. And so values are so important because values are essentially who we are. The things that we value create the foundation for all of the decisions that we're going to make in all aspects of our life. And so unfortunately, there's not just a mismatch most of the time between our values and that of our company, our employers, but there's a mismatch in the values that we think we should have. And so when we talk about values, it's really important to distinguish the difference between conscious-based values and fear-based values. And so when I have a value, I'm conscious of it, I know exactly why I value that. And it's something that I value because it makes me feel good, because it's something that I'm good at or something that I really enjoy. Whereas with a fear-based value, it's something I think I should value. So for instance, I might have my whole life thought that I valued peace, when in reality, I really valued peace because perhaps my parents were always fighting. And so I just didn't want conflict. So I taught myself that peace was a great value to have. So you really have to start by figuring out, what are my conscious values and what are the values I'm carrying around with me, because other people have told me I should value that, or I've told myself I should value that. Money is another great example. If you ask people what their values are, most people are going to say money. But when it comes down to it, how many of us really only solely do what we do just based on the paycheck? And so I actually have a really great workbook. Oh, sorry, Kev, go ahead.
No. Let's talk about the money thing real quick, because this happens all the time, where a college student is going to apply to 50, 60 jobs and take the first one they get because of the paycheck or the dollar sign. And I believe in what we work with the industry is, all of a sudden they're in a job for a couple of years because they took it for the paycheck, and that's what kind of gets in the way of what we were talking about. So how do you think they can look at money as a value, and maybe look at the other benefits in a job, or maybe decline a job offer even?
Yeah, well, the first thing is we have to get really comfortable with money, and we have to figure out our money story. And so for most of us, we walk around life and we come from a place of lack. And so we always think there's never enough. I never have enough time. I never have enough money. I never have enough X, Y, and Z. So you really have to figure out, how much money do you have? How much money do you need to live by? And what do you want to sacrifice? And once you really kind of get down to the bare bones of it, you might realize you have more money than you think you do. If you take a job that's going to make you really happy and give you 20 more hours a week to spend on another project that really excites you in your spare time, but you're making 10 grand less. Well, what is that 10 grand to you? Is that value more than the time you need to spend on your other projects? So we're taught that you should get out of school and get a really great paying job. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take a job, a low paying job, and you should outsell yourself. That's absolutely not the case. But you really have to figure out your money story and figure out what your value is, not only monetarily, but in the other aspects of your life.
So going back to your workbook and some of the things that you've been working on, walk me through like what a typical session with you is like, or what somebody in their mid to early 20s that come to Stacy and be like, oh my God, Stace, I am stuck, or I need to change up my work environment, or I'm not sure what my purpose is. Like, what do you do to help them? And is it face to face or the phone? Is it workbook based? Is it more on you, more on them? I mean, walk me through that.
Yeah, sure. So coaching is fantastic because it's unique to every client. So there are no two sessions that are the same for everybody. And so it's totally tailored to what you need. And so I think the only common denominator is that when we're first starting out together, the first thing we're going to do is really dig deep into who you are. And it sounds like such a simple question, but it's not. It's so loaded. Who you are is based on all of your life experiences and your beliefs and your thoughts and your emotions. And so digging through them and figuring out, where are you holding yourself back? What are the external blocks that are holding you back? And really getting clear on where you want to go is super important, because so many people will come to me and say, okay, I'm stuck. I don't like this. I don't know what I want. So figuring out who you are and then where you want to go is essentially the blueprint that we need to continue on.
So what are some of the things that you see? Like, what are some of the issues that this generation is coming to you with?
Oh my gosh, this generation is they're so restless, right? Because they just want to make this huge impact on the world. And they spent all this time and money and effort and energy in school thinking that, okay, I'm going to come out and have this great job, and it's going to give me all the success and the passion and the money that I need to be happy. And then it's not. It's anything but. So, for this generation, it's really about, again, just bending those rules and creating your own rules and realizing that the job you take right now may not even be in existence when you retire, because our world is changing so rapidly. And so really figuring out what your unique skill sets are and how you're going to leverage them to your advantage.
So you have what we're talking about, kind of like figuring out your money story, right?
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit.
Maybe let's look at two different scenarios. Maybe one that they're thriving. Maybe they do love their job, but they still want to do something outside and create more of a brand for themselves. What would be your suggestion for that person that maybe likes what they're doing, but they're maybe trying to bring in some extra money or trying to create a name for themselves to have a passion project? What would be one or two things you'd tell them to start working on immediately?
Yeah, so first of all, you have to figure out what is it? What is this other thing that you want to do? And get really, really clear on that, right? So who are you targeting? What are your products? What are the services you're offering? You have to really kind of get intimately familiar with your customers and know their pain and put yourself in their shoes. But you also have to know exactly what problem they have that you can solve. What can you solve? What are you passionate about solving? If you can answer that question, then you're golden.
Yeah. And what about the opposite spectrum of the generation we've been talking about? Is they're completely stuck. They don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, and they kind of gone from a really great candidate, really great employee to now they're just kind of, whether they're checked out or they're looking for other opportunities. How can they pivot and kind of get back on the right track?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where I would recommend starting with those values that I talked about. Because as I mentioned, they're really the foundation that we build our whole lives upon. And so if something's off, if I value one thing, but that's not showing up anywhere in my life, I'm going to feel that way. I'm going to feel frustrated and depleted and drained. And so, again, really figuring out what's important to you and how you're going to get that is where you need to start. And in some cases, you can make some minor shifts and find that everything you need and you wanted is right in front of you. Other times, it needs more work, and you do have to make a bigger change or a bigger commitment. And so that's why it is unique to each person. And the coaching sessions work differently for every individual.
Sure. What are, aside from like the money and friends and family, what are some other values that you work on with some of your clients?
Yeah, I mean, so again, that's going to, though there really isn't like a common list of values because it really is different for everybody. But, just feeling valued in of itself is a big value. People want to feel appreciated and they want to feel like they're being heard and they want to feel like they have a voice and that their work isn't going unnoticed. And they also want to grow and develop. And so, they want that constructive criticism. They want to know where, they can improve or what they can do differently. So, if you're in a situation where you're getting performance reviews all the time and they're always perfect, you're going to feel just as frustrated if you're the employee that's getting, the worst review, but their boss isn't telling them why.
Sure. So how can they talk to their boss or their supervisor? Like maybe they're trying to change their work environment. Like obviously they got to build courage to go to their supervisor. But what are some strategies or one or two questions or things they could say to their supervisor to maybe help create a better work environment for the near future?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point. You have to be your own advocate because it's your job to go to your boss and say, hey, this is where I want to be and this is what I want to work on. Your boss doesn't have a crystal ball, unfortunately. They don't know what you're thinking. So you have to really learn to be your own advocate, but you obviously have to do that in a very professional and diplomatic way. And so I always suggest, if you're going to go to your boss and ask to do something differently, have a solution. So just don't walk in your boss's office and say, okay, I'm not happy or I'm bored or I hate this. You want to use your strengths to your advantage and say, okay, boss, I noticed that we have this gap and this is how I can fill it. And here's the plan that I developed to do so. Do I have your approval to maybe work on this for a couple hours? So, that's the really cool thing is that the solution is whatever you want it to be, but you have to really take the time and initiative to find it.
That's a great idea. So going to your boss with a solution in mind and try to almost encourage them to why this would be better for the organization, right?
Exactly, because then it's a win-win. Because if you go to your boss and you're just complaining, they're going to kick you out of their office. Whereas if you go to your boss and make it look like you're really helping them, but in turn helping you, then everybody wins. They're happy and you're happy.
All right, so going to your boss might take some courage. People might be able to do it. How about telling your parents? So, because our parents, have a very idealistic, idea in mind of what they want their son or daughter to do, especially leaving college right away. They want to make sure that they're financially stable, pay their student loans, land on their feet, maybe get a really successful career. But like, how do we go to our parents? How do we tell them, hey, mom and dad, we're taking a risk, or what are some things that you would tell some people that you're working with if they're like, hey, I'm scared to tell my parents or my loved ones?
Right, and that's a very real fear, right? Because we all want to be loved and accepted by those that we love, including our parents, our friends, our boyfriends, our girlfriends. And so it's really scary to be vulnerable and to tell them, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this job making 20 grand a year, or I'm going to start my own business or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, once you know who you are and you're really comfortable with that, you're going to start to recognize that it doesn't really matter what they say. What they're saying is their point of view, and that's based on their experiences and their entire lives of who they are. And so they're coming from a very different frame of reference than where you're coming from. And of course, you want to take their input into consideration, right? If what they're saying resonates with you, then sure, you want to consider it. But it's really learning about becoming comfortable making your own decisions and not seeking that approval. And if you do feel like I can't do this without their blessing, then that's when working with a coach can really come in handy to figure out, why is their approval so important? What is that approval really going to give you that you don't currently have? Mm-hmm. A lot of times you're going to find all these subconscious thoughts and beliefs lurking that aren't serving you and are really holding you back from moving forward. So long story short, you want to take their advice, but if you're really having a hard time moving forward with it, I would suggest a coach.
Yeah, and I think that's the toughest thing is almost trying to sometimes keep the blinders on of like you believe in this thing and you're going to go for it no matter what people around you tell you. You're going to just keep trucking along, and that's the thing where people like you come in, especially young life coaches like yourself, can really identify with this generation because you're going through it, you've lived it. So why do you love doing this? You've been doing this since the fall, right? Almost a year. What are things that you love about it?
I didn't really know what to call it until I went to coach training. But yeah, it's been almost a year now of official coaching. I'm sorry, what was the question?
And what do you love about it? Yeah, what do you love about it?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I was saying before how you have to get comfortable making your own rules. What I love about it is that I get to help people in my own way, and I get to make money doing it. And so I always felt really guilty in my past life about, I picked a major, a sociology major, and I didn't really have a rhyme or reason why. I just said I wanted to help people. And when I got out of college, I was trying to find that box that I fit into. Should I be a teacher? Should I be a social worker? What should I do so I could help people? And once I found coaching, it was like, oh my gosh, this is what I was put on this planet to do. I get to help people in my own way, support them, help them be the best versions of themselves, and I get to, feel good and make money too. So it's really, win-win all around. Kev, you froze again. Did we lose you? Kev? Okay, let's just hang in there while Kevin returns.
You there?
Okay, we're back again.
I am so frustrated by this.
You're certainly retweeting Optimum for sure tonight.
Oh man, I'm getting on the phone with Optimum right after this. Again, we apologize for technical difficulties. All right, Stace, why don't we jump into this? We'll close it out real quick. I have like 4 or 5 random questions, quick fire questions to ask you, okay?
Ready.
Cool. What was the last concert you were at?
Oh, it's the Backstreet Boys. I'm a teeny bopper at heart. It'll never change.
You're kidding me. Backstreet Boys?
Oh, Kevin, would I be kidding you on this one?
Anybody watching this that knows Stacy probably would have guessed the same thing.
No one is surprised by that answer at all.
What movie deserves a sequel?
Oh, The Notebook, totally.
Interesting. Okay.
Rocky, unfortunately, but yeah.
Another chick flick. Okay. What is your superpower?
Oh gosh, my superpower. Oh, that's a hard question, Kev. I don't know. I think my superpower might be, gosh, I don't want to answer this. You're tough.
We'll go back to that one.
Go back.
So you and I started working together as grad assistants, I think probably like we were both 23, 24-ish. So what would you go back and tell your 23-year-old self?
Oh my God, I was thinking something lighten up. It's not that serious. I thought I had to figure out the world. We thought we had to figure out the world at that age, and you don't. So life is, it's a journey, and it's a game. So have fun and play it.
Yeah. One of the things we failed to mention is Stacy grew up in New Jersey, has now actually moved and is now living and working outside of the Washington metro area. So this is a Washington-related question, but what is your favorite Washington hotspot to visit?
Ooh, that's a great question.
In D.C.
Yeah. For me, I just love walking around the tidal basin. It's just so beautiful, especially if you can get down here during the cherry blossoms. If you can come off season, that's even better because you don't have to fight the tourists. But I think just walking around and seeing the monuments in the water, it's gorgeous.
Sure. Before we revisit the superpower question, I have one last question. So I think a lot of time we're always on the go and we're connected to our phone. It's a good thing and bad thing. So how do you kind of take time to unwind, reflect, but also like focus? Because I realized like you're a very focused young professional. So like, how do you do that? How do you unwind, reflect, and refocus?
Well, I mean, the one thing I've done that's really helped is just schedule time for it. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but working as a solopreneur, you have to schedule out your days because you don't have a boss telling you what you need to do and when. And so I set my work hours and I set my fun hours and I stick to it because it's really easy to let your phone and your computer and your email kind of take over. But if you're not taking care of yourself, then all that will suffer. So you got to take care of you first.
Totally agree. And so we'll go back to it. What do you think your superpower is?
Well, I mean, I think if you'd ask my husband, it would be to always sense when people are not being truthful with themselves.
Yes. I would say from especially the last 3 months, talking with you, I think you're an excellent listener, but you also are able to give great advice, obviously. So I think you definitely found your niche being a life coach.
Yeah. And
So,
I have a really special offer for the folks on the call tonight. And so
yes, how do people connect with Stacy?
yeah,
How do they connect with you?
I created this awesome resource packet. So we talked about a lot, and unfortunately, there's a lot more other tips and tricks that I have for you all that we don't have time to mention. So if you shoot me an email at stacycampesi@gmail.com, I have this great workbook that I'll send to you. So you can email me, you can catch me on Twitter at Stacy Campesi, or go to my website and either call or contact me that way.
Awesome. So again, I recommend anybody that's watching this live or happen to stumble upon this to really reach out to Stacy, especially if you're stuck. Regardless if you're a young professional, maybe you're mid-career, end of your career, Stacy can definitely help you, especially if you're in the DC area, but I know she's willing to work with people all over. So again, that's stacycampesi@gmail.com, at Stacy Campesi. And again, whether it's through the niche movement or Stacy, you can connect. We can connect you guys together. Stacy, anything else for the audience?
No, I just want to say thank you so much, and definitely reach out because questions, comments, stories are always just fun to hear. So don't be strangers.
Cool. So working backwards, we want to remember to take time for ourselves, schedule it out, make sure we take time to reflect and refocus. Look at your money story, right? So it's not always about the paycheck or maybe things you can do on the side, but really figure out what your situation is and what you can make work to be happy. And the third thing is the values, right? Like what your intrinsic values are. And what environments you want to be put in and what environments you're currently in, right? That hit the nail on the head?
You did, absolutely.
Cool. So again, my name's Kevin O'Connell, founder of the Niche Movement. This has been a super exciting niche story, not sponsored by Optimum Online. So if Verizon or Xfinity or anybody wants to jump on here and sponsor this next month, tweet at us and we will set it up. But anyway, nichemovement.com. Check us out. We have content every Tuesday and Thursday. We have our next niche story coming up in about a month from now. And again, we're very close to reaching our goal to fund this book, launch full-time, and some other exciting announcements is we have our career event that I talked about with the authors of Bold. That's now booked for September 17th in New York City. It's going to be Adventure for America. Details will be rolling out in about 2 weeks on that. So again, if you're a young professional or recent grad, college graduate, senior, this would be an ideal event for you to come out to and network and learn some unconventional career strategies. So Stace, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kev.
This is Kevin from the Niche Movement signing off. Thank you guys for following along and watching.
Good night.